go. Is it recording on your side?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so hello, this is Marisa, my interviewee. I want to start off by saying thank you for agreeing to this interview as part of my history class at Sacramento City College. As part of this class, we are acting as working historians by doing this interview. Our goal is to create a record of the COVID era because we know this will be seen as a historic moment in the future. I have a few questions for you. Let's begin. All right, so my first question is, did you experience a transition from in-person to online during COVID? If so, how did that affect your ability to learn?
Thank you, Jonathan. Yes, to answer your question, I did experience this transition. So, in the very first stages of the COVID pandemic hitting us, specifically like California, um, I was in my senior year of high school, meaning that I'd have to change all of my events to online learning environments, including like AP exams. Um, Prom was canceled, a lot of extracurricular activities, as well as like sports that I was involved in. I also had to adjust to the online space in that I would find that my first semester of college would be online, and I was taking 5 asynchronous classes. Um, it was my first semester of college ever. I didn't have anyone prior that I knew who went to community college. The rest of my family have only gone to 4-year institutions. So that was something in itself, having to navigate that and find resources online, as well as make connections, like socialize and such. That was very difficult to navigate. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. All right, on to the next question. Did you experience a transition from in-person to remote work during COVID? If so, how do you think that affected your ability to do your job?
Yeah, so this is a great question, actually. I did experience some effects of the transition in particular. I think I more so received the side effects. So the program coordinator that I I work at school on campus at the Raza Center. So the program coordinator had to deal with finding out how to make an inclusive and engaging space in an online environment versus the in-person environment prior to that. I entered college when it was already online, so that was um, not necessarily something I had to transition from or to, but I did have to adjust myself since I had never worked online or anything like that. And this was also my first job. Um, so yeah, I had to deal with those effects to an extent. Wait,
Okay,
can
go
I
ahead.
add more?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just thought of something. So to answer the second part of the question and how it affected my ability to do my job, I would say that it definitely made it hard to make connections with my coworkers and my peers. Um, it was difficult to manage meeting new people online, and actually make connections because we'd be working with each other for the next year or so, um, as well as figuring out um, how to connect with students in an online environment. I'm also part of the Puente Club at school, which is difficult to make engaging events and entertaining productions to keep students engaged and increase those retention rates. That's all I wanted to add.
No, yeah, thank you for sharing that. Good to hear um, about things you've done or you do here on campus. It's interesting to hear that side of the story. All right. Did you make any changes to your goals while going through COVID?
And by goals, is this like generally speaking or educational?
It can be educational or, yeah, general or both.
Okay. Let's start with educational. As far as my goals went, I'm a big advocate of sticking to your goals and like reaching your dreams, even though it might seem impossible. So those have always stayed the same. My goals have stayed the same. I'm still going to transfer to a 4 year. I'm on track to do that, and I've just this week I've been getting like my acceptances and such, so that's been exciting. So my goals have stayed the same, but my route and my means to get there have changed. Um, for example, um, I've had to take online classes. I've had to do online um, programs and such, even for like transfer student programs at 4 year institutions. Those have all shifted to online environments, but my goals have not changed since then. They have changed in the way that they've played out, but they haven't changed in terms of like what my goal is. Um, and as far as like outside of school, I still have goals and I still want to reach them. I think there definitely was a time in my life where I was like, okay, um, especially during quarantine, like I want to say like mid September of 2020, I was like actually realizing that I would not be able to go to school in person. Um, and I think that kind of just put a like a cloud over my head for a minute. In that I was very pessimistic about what would actually be able um, to happen in my future and what would be attainable. But eventually, I would say like by the fall of 2021, so like a whole year later, things started opening back up, and it seemed like there was a big, huge like ray of sunshine, like an actual hope for humankind. Um, like this might seem extra, but it's really not. This is truly what I felt. I really did not see a day where I would like be able to hang out with my friends, especially since my like my grandma's immunocompromised and I spend a lot of time with her. So I just didn't see a lot of regular things happening, such as going to grocery stores, even going to Costco, Walmart, wherever, or amusement parks. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm glad to hear that your goals have not changed. I also enjoy the transition of going back in person. All right, on to the next question. Did your crew, people you spend time with in person or through media, change because of COVID? That kind of goes
Yes.
back to the next question, but if you can touch on that a bit more.
Okay. Yeah. As previewed, so since I did spend a lot of time with my grandma and I lived with her for a little while. She's immunocompromised, and at the time when she wasn't vaccinated, it just wasn't worth it for me to spend time with other people. So for a lot of my time in quarantine, it was just like me and my family, my immediate family, no friends. Um, and so when people started to hang out a little more, even prior to being vaccinated, I would have to tell my friends that I couldn't hang out with them. I had a group of like four four of the girls who I knew from high school. Um, and they would hang out on their own, and I'd let them know like it's fine if you guys want to go do something, like I appreciate the invitation. But I realistically can't do it because of my grandma's immunocompromisation, or her like her, yeah. Um as far as that went, I did notice that it kind of drifted us apart. Even now, I try to only hang out with vaccinated people, and one of them is not, so I've definitely distanced myself from them. Um, it was also kind of just hard to figure out where we're gonna hang out. Let's say if they were vaccinated by the time everyone got vaccinated, just because a lot of spaces weren't open, school was closed, coffee shops were closed, libraries were closed. Truly, the only places we would go were like public parks or outdoor spaces, and that got kind of repetitive after a while.
Thank you. It's really good that you're looking out for your grandma like that. Um, yeah, I understand with the situation with trying to hang out with friends because it's difficult because of COVID at the time. But now we're getting back into that, trying to get back into that transition of going back to the norm. All right. What role did social media and the news play in your experiences during COVID?
Yeah. First, I'm gonna start off with the news because I feel like that's an easier one to tackle than social media, which is interesting because if you were to ask someone like 10 years ago, I bet you the news would be a lot more difficult to tackle than social media. So, as far as the news, um, I remember here. Okay, so in high school in January of 2020, I was in senior year and we had an English class, and we'd have weekly discussions. And this one article in particular was about the pandemic and how it's going on in China and how there was a surge um, in cases, but we never got to talk about it because something came up. So we just moved on to the next article. So that's one thing that really affected me and I think will probably stick with me forever is that we didn't know what was coming. And that's just a testament to show we didn't know the impact and severity that this would have. Um, as far as the news went, I think there was like a hyper focus on spreading this news as much like as fast as we could without putting in enough effort into actually informing us about what was going on. Granted, though, we didn't really have much information on what was going on, and by we, I mean the public, not really the experts and the medical people and like all these politicians and such who have access to that kind of information. Um, Also, just the way that not really news outlets, but people within the media who work for these news outlets would portray this information and how they would share it. And I think especially since like bringing in politics into this because it is about politics, unfortunately. Um, I think politics had a lot to do with like steering us away from science, which is really sad. And I know that a lot of measures could have been put into use so that we could prevent all these cases and people having side effects and deaths um, from the virus. So I think the news played a really big role. Um, it created a lot of like mass hysteria as well. Um, and I think people were just trying to be like careful with what they were consuming, myself included. And then we can move over to the first part of the question being social media. Um, in broader senses, I think social media has its ups and its downs, right? So one of its main big ups or like pros was the social movements that were happening in 2020. I think a lot of people um, finally realized the power of online environments in that way, especially regarding like the Black Lives Matter movement and other political movements that were to follow. Um, they had a lot of success and coverage from social media, which I'm grateful for. Um, but also, social media has caused a lot of havoc and misinformation regarding science data, um, regarding the pandemic and stuff like that. And also, social media played an interesting effect in social and like people's socialization, especially considering that, for example, me, I wasn't able to hang out with my friends, so I'd use social media like Instagram, Snapchat, Zoom, FaceTime, all those social medias to connect with my friends, but also I would be consuming a lot of content that at times I don't think was healthy for myself. So I'd have to like limit myself and I'd put timers on my phone to restrict me from doing that just because it can be very toxic at times, especially when you're like alone and by yourself, let's say in your room, like on lockdown in your house. So it's tricky to navigate that.
No, yeah, thank you for sharing that. I like how you tied in social media and the news to politics. I think that's something that needs to be known about the COVID era, most definitely. For this next question, it kind of goes back to one of our first questions as well with goals. How did going through COVID change the way you think about the future?
Oh man, this is a good one. Uh, I think it did two things to me. At first, I got the shock, and I was like, "Whoa, what if we never have a bright future? What if there's no light in this tunnel? Like, what if there's no end to it?" But it also helped me. Um, it helped me appreciate the times that I had before. I think it really made me put my life into perspective, and that like no single day is going to be the same as it was prior to COVID. Um, Hopefully we can get somewhere towards there, but I don't know if it'll ever be like the same, right? Because a lot of things have happened since, and a lot of people are affected in different ways. Um, but in that same way, it's exciting to see what kind of future we can build, what kind of things we can do soon. As I previously mentioned, in like the height of quarantine, I would say all the way from September 2020 to like maybe July 2021, I was honestly super, again, pessimistic, and I had no hope left um, for like a brighter future, or even being able to hang out with my friends one day. Um, or even honestly, yeah, like going to concerts, stuff like that. I just really did not think that it would happen again. Um, and even today, like right now, um, it's weird to think about like a future and where masks are not required or mandated. And it's weird because I've gotten used to wearing it, but I also want to get used to not wearing it now that um, data and science have shown that our cases have gone down extremely, and it's safe to not wear them anymore, and vaccination rates have gone up. I don't know, it's just really weird. Um, yeah, I'm hopeful for the future now. I wasn't before, but I am now.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that great response. I'm really glad that you have hope for the future, as do I. Um, all right. So this one kind of also ties into the last question. How did going through COVID change the way you think about the past before COVID?
Oh yeah, cool. Um, Honestly, sometimes I would like freak myself out and be like, "Oh my gosh, why are we not wearing masks in this picture?" And there's like tons of people, or even on my Snapchat memories from like 4 years ago, and I was at like Disneyland or something like that, um, with a bunch of people around me. I was like concerned why I wasn't wearing a mask. Um, as far as let's see, the past goes, um, I have to put some thought into this because I think I covered a little bit of it earlier. Um, One second. Let me put some thought into this.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Mm. Oh, okay. I guess I can speak about this aspect of my life. Um, as far as like my relationship with my dogs, I used to not hang out with them at all. Or like I would, I just didn't hang out with them as much as I did during quarantine and like social isolation and stuff like that. Um, So during that period, I got to spend a lot more time with my dogs as well as my community. Um, and in my neighborhood in particular, it's very like safe to walk around, and tons of people go on runs. They walk their kids, their dogs, stuff like that. I have neighbors who have rabbits who walk their rabbits. Um, but prior to COVID, I feel like there weren't as many people out and about, especially like after work and during their lunch times. But I've noticed a lot of people now take advantage of that like 12 to 1 p.m. hour, in which they'll like go for a run or walk to the park or just like walk around their neighborhood. So I noticed that's a difference, whereas before it'd be very desolate and like quiet.
Thank you for sharing that. I like how you mentioned looking at some photos or pictures from before COVID makes you think like, why are they not wearing masks? That just shows how much pandemic has impacted us. Thank you for sharing that. Um, all right, for our last question, if you could relive the past 2 years, what would you do differently? Interesting.
Man, I think just for myself, what could I do differently? I have a lot of opinions of what other people could have done differently, but me, um, I don't know. I think I could have just been like, you know what? I want to say I want to be less hard on myself, but I didn't know at the time what our future was to hold. I really didn't expect us to go back to anything that we're in today, which is semi-normal. Um, let's see. If I could relive the past 2 years, what would I do differently? Um, I think I would enjoy the peace and quiet a little bit more. I definitely did take advantage of it, but I think I could have taken advantage a little bit more by like figuring out a little bit more of what I like to do as far as hobbies goes. Um, but honestly, I did that too. I did a lot of soul searching. Um, I wish I could have done more community building, but obviously, like everyone was told to stay at home. Um, I don't think I'd really do anything major differently. I think everything was it happened the way it was supposed to happen. Um, yeah.
Thank you, Marisa. I like that response. It happened like it was supposed to happen. I know maybe some of us wouldn't make no different changes. We just stick to what we did. All right, so that wraps up our questions. Thank you for your responses. They were all great. I also want to thank you for sharing your thoughts and your time. I'm going to end this interview in just a moment. This project is for my history class. Um, calibration.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, we are. This project for my history class is part of a collaboration with Stanford University and the Life in Courts and Global Archive. If you approve, our interview will be housed online. So we would be online content creators. If you do not want this interview shared, it will only go to my professor, Holly Piscopo from Sacramento State College, and a Stanford fellow this year. If you like to ask questions, I can give you her contact information. And yeah, but if you want, we can go through that. If not, it's okay.
Yeah, most definitely. I would appreciate that. Yeah. I think this would be very helpful for others.
All right. All right. Well, thank you, Marisa. I will conclude this interview. I appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.